Hi, David. How are you?
How are you?
Yes, so David will introduce himself, but I do know David from the Private Client Dining Club. We've met a couple of times here in Nairobi, but unfortunately, because of COVID, it has meant that we don't get to travel as much as we would like. But I'm glad that you're here virtually from the UK and that you'll take us to the next session. So thank you, David, and welcome.
Delighted to be here, Anna. Congratulations on this conference. Great to be with you today. Over the next 60 minutes, we're going to talk about wealth structuring and succession planning with an expert panel that I'm going to introduce in a second. After that hour, we're going to run a 30-minute session looking on some global investment trends with the Barclays team from London. So an excellent 90 minutes ahead with me. As always, we like to get questions in from our audience when these sessions are interactive. They're most interesting, so drop your questions in and I will be looking out for the chat to bring them to our panelists as we move through. Before we start our discussion, I'm just going to introduce the three panelists we have today for the session. First of all, we have Bimpe Nkontchou, who is the managing partner of W8 Advisory. Bimpe is a dual qualified lawyer with over 30 years experience in England and Nigeria. She's the founder and managing principal of W8 Advisory, a wealth advisory practice and multifamily office in London focused on African entrepreneurs and their families. She also owns sister company W8 Wealth Limited, which provides regulated financial investment advice to African business families. Bimpe is extremely well qualified and is also a certified trust and estate practitioner and a member of the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investments. W8 Advisory come highly recommended in the Spears 2021 Wealth Management Index. Bimpe has also recently launched a digital platform called Wealth 8, which uses technology to bring access to investing and portfolios of global financial products and financial education to a larger audience in the UK and abroad. Bimpe has earned a reputation as a trusted advisor to a large client base of affluent Africans, entrepreneurs and family business owners. So terrific to have Bimpe with us today. We've also got Mona K. Doshi, who's a partner at Anjarwalla and Khanna. Mona is a partner at Anjarwalla and Khanna who co-heads the private client law practice and also the real estate and construction department. Her practice includes advising on succession planning, wills, probate matters, onshore and offshore trusts, shareholders agreements for family businesses, the full suite of services that business owners might need to help with their succession planning. She's listed as a notable practitioner and high-level advisor in Chambers 2019 and 2020, so comes very highly rated. We've also got Mr. Madabhushi Soundararajan, sorry for that pronunciation, who is the Managing Director of MCT Trust and Corporate Services, with a responsibility to drive business strategy and provide leadership to a team in building strong and sustainable fiduciary services based on the highest standards of professionalism and government. He brings 38 years of experience in banking to this panel with strengths in corporate finance and corporate credit, initially with State Bank of India, latterly with Standard Chartered Bank in Kenya, and recently had a brief stint as CEO of Delta Corp East Africa Limited, where he led the property development group in completing iconic developments in Nairobi. So a terrific panel joining us today. We're just going to open up the discussion now. And already in the conference, we've heard the word family office a few times. And I just think it'd be helpful to define the concept a little bit more closely and also see how you're seeing that concept being applied. I mean, perhaps, Bimpe, if you'd like to give us a sense of what we mean when we say family office, could you perhaps break that down a little bit?
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm really trying to start my camera. Not sure whether it's been disabled from the other end, but I'm very pleased to participate. Thank you, Anne, for the invitation. Is it possible to maybe switch my camera on? That's right. Okay. Looks like it's going to work now. Perfect. That's right. Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Well, speaking to you to be honest with you, I'm actually in Paris, although I live in London and work in London, but I'm on a short break here. But thankfully, with technology, we can all join in from anywhere. So thank you, David. Thank you for the introduction. Again, I'm pleased and honored to be a part of this distinguished panel, and hopefully to be reaching a far-reaching audience. So my name is Bimpe Nkontchou, and I'm going to quickly answer David's question. Basically, family. Why a family office? That's the question, right? Why are we even talking about this concept? Now, this concept is probably quite new on the continent, but I have to say, it's the reason why there's so many families of wealth in other parts of the world that have survived for many, many generations. And as far as I'm concerned, it's about time, we on the continent also got in on the act, in preserving our wealth, in building our wealth, and having a structure that will pass the wealth to the next generation. So really, let's look at the family office. I would say the landscape. Again, taking it from, I would say, those who've done it in a very advanced way. You can talk about pretty much about any strong brand that that you use, whether you own a Gucci bag, whether you bank with JP Morgan, whether you have gone to a museum. In the UK, we've got the Sainsbury's Museum, we've got Tate, the Sainsbury wing in the museums, we've got Tate Museum. Those are all family names. The shoes we wear, if you wear Clark's shoes, if you shop at Walmart in the US, and possibly any of Walmart's subsidiaries across the continent, that's a family name. And Cadbury is the chocolate we eat. And many of the families have existed for many, many generations. So really, when we're thinking about why wealth families rely on family offices, I think the answer is because it's their one-stop shop. It's their holistic structure, the way in which they consolidate their wealth, in a way in which they have the means of managing their wealth in a sort of very strategic way. Managing the acquisition of the wealth, we heard about the Flick family earlier on. He worked very hard, acquired a lot of wealth, but as time went on, he realized that perhaps the best thing was to liquidate it. But in liquidating and even owning a lot of money, a lot of assets, you find that you can't rely on your executive assistant in your company or your CFO in your company. You actually do need to have an independent team around you. Sometimes it's a team that's dedicated to just your family, and sometimes it'd be a team that has many families. I mean, I run Double 8 Advisory, so just like Regal Africa, it's a multi-family office platform. And basically what we do is look after families of wealth across the African continent, many of whom have, footprints in the UK, in the US, across the world, literally. And again, when you're a family of global wealth, it's difficult sometimes to keep track. Whilst you're busy making the money, you find that you can develop, a team around you that can keep track of where your money is, who's looking after it, whether it's doing well or doing badly. Again, the succession planning around that is very, very important. So I think those are just my own, I would say, input as to why a family office is necessary. Yes, it's probably still a new animal on the African continent, but just like Anne mentioned earlier, we're seeing that the African continent is a place that's generating a lot of wealth. Families are becoming wealthier. I think the interesting statistics I picked up, where we've got currently about 145,000 HNIs holding about 800 billion of assets on the African continent. And this is apparently estimated to grow by about 30% by 2023. The countries that are the main hubs are South Africa, Kenya, you got to know, and Nigeria, where I'm from. And so it's actually, I would say, responsible for those families, especially if they want to see their family brands, especially their businesses and family assets survive, create a legacy for the long term. It's necessary to start having a structure of advisors around them. And that's what a family office is, a structured team of advisors. Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you. Madabhushi, do you have a view on how family offices are used across the continent? Where have you seen this concept being applied?
Well, as Bimpe says, family office concept is rather new to Africa. But having said that, I think a lot of families have informal, casual structures, and you can call them family offices. But I think what is perhaps important is for structured way of managing family wealth going forward. And that is beginning to happen. I mean, I would say even in Kenya, certainly this is a concept which has been kind of understood very well in South Africa. Look at the Oppenheimer family, for example, and also in Nigeria. But I think it's also beginning to happen in Kenya. And we also, I mean, it's a fact that quite a few high net worth families, ultra high net worth families from Africa, they do run family offices to Geneva, where they have, let's say, professionals managing their wealth and managing the entire family requirements, even concierge kind of services. All that actually happens, but that concept needs to be formalized a little bit more. And I mean, like Bimpe said said earlier on, it is very important for family offices to really future-proof wealth that has been created with blood, sweat, and tears by family patriarchs. And I mean, there's a saying, of course, is a cliche. We heard about it, shirt sleeves and all that. But it's also a fact that, say, normally a patriarch buys a lot of assets, and then the son builds and accumulates. Then the grandson starts splurging and spending, and maybe afterwards, I think, unfortunately, wealth tends to dissipate. I think in most families in Africa are now either in the first generation or in the second generation of wealth creation. And it's vitally important, as the wealth has transited from the first generation to the second generation now, they need to start planning structures that are future-proof, that do not dissipate and but like we say in physics, energy is neither created nor destroyed. Wealth should not be destroyed. Wealth is a continuum. Wealth is fungible. We talk about the velocity of wealth. So the wealth can take different shapes and different forms to suit the different aspirations and requirements of different family members. And at the end of the day, also to serve the community, the larger community at large. And of course, there are various ways of, say, managing wealth. One is single family offices, for which, of course, you need substantial wealth, or multi-family office structures that Anne has talked about, or even family investment companies, which are now becoming more and more common, and family investment companies, or an alternative platform to trusts, because one could also use trusts, whereby you actually legally transfer wealth to a trustee, and the trustee takes care of the requirements of the families in a professional and structured way. And you can also have a hybrid model where trustees work closely with family investment companies for efficient wealth management, also building tax efficiencies there. Because FICs, family investment companies, the taxation is like a corporate tax. And you can avoid a lot of IHT, inheritance tax issues, and also capital gains tax issues by basically passing on gifts from the patriarchs to the next generation, and also any investment returns can be distributed as dividends, which are more tax efficient. So there are various ways of doing it. I mean, I can go on.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Very, very helpful. Bimpe, I mean, is there a level of wealth, or is it a level of complexity that dictates whether people look at these services, or if delivered in a virtual way, is it available to sort of scale up and down? How do you find clients engage with these kind of services and assess when they need them?
Well, if you're looking at a single family office, this is it, basically where a client decides that he or she wants their own dedicated team. They want their own lawyer, their own tax advisor, their own property manager, their own accountant, often even someone who's either in investment management sort of officer, who's probably an ex-private banker, for example. So imagine you have at least those 5 people surrounding you, looking after your wealth, and dedicated only to yourself, it means that you're having to pay their salary, because at the end of the day, you're employing them, and that you created your single family office, and that's quite expensive. That's, obviously you're looking at, obviously very experienced and accomplished people who you ask to join you and create this team around you. And the rule of thumb tends to be that families who have single family offices are worth at least $100 million US. And believe it or not, in the US, there are over 3,000 such single family offices, and who manage over $1 trillion. And so it's, it's not impossible. I mean, it sounds, an amazing number, but the whole idea is that single family office will actually grow the wealth, will actually ensure that there isn't the things like tax or things like non-compliance with regulations and all of those things, or having a proper business plan will actually help enhance the wealth creation. So there's something to be said for, having that level of expertise around you. However, the multifamily office option is also open to a lot more people. And in fact, when I wound up with the law firm I was running in London, I ran a law firm from 1998 when I moved to the UK from Nigeria till 2014, and suddenly realized there was a big gap in the market for, someone to advise clients on multiple areas which were not just legal, and hence the creation of a multifamily office structure. So I created a structure, and I've invited families onto that structure. And that's what a multifamily office tends to be. It's either 3 or 4 very wealthy families saying, we'll pull our resources together and create a team. In Africa, that's kind of a bit more, I would say, precious, a bit more sensitive, because many families are not quite there yet to be able to be transparent about their wealth, journey. So I think it's taking professionals like Anne and myself to create a structure and to then say, here's a menu of services, and here's what we can provide. And so when families, clients join, literally sometimes they will join for 2 or 3 specific services, and I don't have a minimum. I mean, I don't say you've got to, unlike private banks that will say to a client, you need to have 1 million, 3 million, $5 million US for us to onboard you as a private client, banking client, and provide a private banking services. Multifamily offices, I think the ones that will be successful in Africa cannot really afford to say there's a minimum, because clients are often asset rich and cash poor. And so whilst they have, maybe amazing family businesses that are still growing, and that family business is probably worth, the tens of hundreds of millions sometimes, and maybe have a property portfolio that's also pretty considerable, the actual liquidity that was required to pay the services may not be there, we won't have 100 million lying around, basically. But what I say to clients, this is the menu, this is the cost of the service. And the first thing really that most clients come on board for is to really get advice on how to consolidate their wealth, how to create that wealth register, how to really understand what their family P&L is. And so we help them to actually devise that. And in devising that family P&L, we can straight away see where the weaknesses or the pain points are, where more help is needed. Is it on tax compliance? Is it on, also financial planning, budgetary issues? Is it on property management? Because sometimes their real estate portfolio is there's too much real estate there, and it's high risk. And perhaps if we find a way of diversifying the portfolio for them, then straight away we help them to even release some cash, some liquidity, and help to even have a pot of wealth that can and should be helped, to be enhanced and used to sort of oil the growth of the wealth pot generally. So the short answer to that, not giving the long one, is that no, for a multifamily office, there isn't a minimum, but there is a raft of services, all of which have to be paid for. And I think when I sit with the client and help decide what they need, we can, and sometimes it's bite-sized. We can say in year 1, we'll do this and this. In year 2, we'll scale up to that. And year 3, we'll have helped you to do so much, release cash, manage your tax exposure to the extent that you'll feel comfortable about the need to actually pay for more services.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Bimpe. Mona, just to bring you in succession planning, having an up-to-date will is a critical key document to ensure assets flow in the right direction on someone's demise. So it will be very interesting to hear from you as to how you work with clients to help them with succession plans, and why having the right will in place is so important.
Thank you, David. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's very important for clients to consider having a will and doing their succession planning. We work with a lot of families who accumulate so much wealth over the years, but then they've not given thought to what is going to happen once they pass on. And these are conversations that people sometimes don't wish to have, but we've realized, especially during COVID times, that these conversations have become more important. And just to put it into context, in Kenya, a lot of families don't have wills, and then when they pass on, there's so much litigation in courts. So families then don't get access to that wealth because for many years, it's all embroiled in litigation. Recently, a very wealthy Kenyan passed on, and I'll just read out what the judge said. It was one of the longest succession disputes in Kenya. And the judge stated, one wishes that Kenyans can get into the habit of planning their lives, and especially thinking about what will happen to their families and properties upon death. It is not too much to ask that the planning be done by way of writing wills. This applies not only to Kenyans, but families all over the world. And nowadays, people don't just invest in their own country; they invest globally. So it is very important to have proper legal advice in terms of succession planning. In Kenya, for example, when someone passes on without leaving a will, it becomes an interstate estate. So you don't have control over who inherits. It goes to your spouse just as a life interest. And then if you have children, then it goes absolutely to your children. If your spouse is not there, it goes equally to your children. If you don't have children, then there's a line, it goes to your father, if not their mother. There's a line of beneficiaries. And in most cases, a person would wish to have control as to who their estate will devolve to. They may wish to even, give assets to other people who are not part of their immediate family. They may wish to give more to one child than the other, depending on their ages, depending on their circumstances. Also, it's important to get legal advice in terms of writing a will, because in most jurisdictions, there are forced heirship rules. You need to provide for a class of people, such as in Kenya, we call them dependents. So if you do not provide for a particular person who falls in the category of dependents, then that person may bring a claim against your estate to say that I've not been provided for. So when making a will, it's not as simple as just writing down who you wish to provide for. You need to think of the category of dependents. So dependents would include a wife, would include children, would include family members that you've been maintaining prior to death. And there are discussions about maybe this definition being widened by legislation in future. So these are important considerations to think about when making a will. Another consideration in Kenya, for example, is we have Sharia law. So where it's a Muslim person, that Muslim would need to consider as to if they make a will and there's a challenge, then Sharia law would take precedence. So these are important considerations that need to be thought about. And it would be best to seek legal advice, because a badly drafted will would mean that, again, it's a very high possibility that the judge would then set it aside and it would then fall under intestacy. As part of succession planning, trusts have been mentioned as well. So one could consider where, there's a special needs child or a person in the family who is elderly, who may not be able to manage the wealth. Then should you have a lifetime trust created? Should you have a will trust? These are all the kinds of discussions that we have with clients when they come to see us, because you need to look at the circumstances of each family. Furthermore, do they have assets just in Kenya, or do they have assets in other jurisdictions? Also, probate in Kenya takes over 12 to 15 months. So while a probate is going on, a family doesn't have access to that wealth. So in those circumstances, would you consider having certain joint assets, certain joint bank accounts, so that at least the family has access to that cash, so that they're not stuck during that probate process. These are all the kind of discussions that we have with clients. Because when you accumulate wealth, you need to also know how you're going to pass it on. Furthermore, as I mentioned, it's not only Kenya, you may have assets in other jurisdictions. So would you need to have another will in that jurisdiction? Because every country has got its own formalities. Some countries require to have a handwritten will. Some countries follow civil law. It's very important for a legal advisor to have a full outline of what assets a person has, so that tax is considered. Some countries have inheritance tax. Some countries like Kenya doesn't have inheritance tax. So we look at it broadly, and we work with international advisors as well, so that we can give a full picture to a client when considering their succession planning.
Thank you. And in the introduction, there was mention of family circumstances changing, like children going to study in the UK or the US, and so succession plans have to be robust enough to encompass, changes that go on. So how do you find you work with clients who have family members move abroad? How do the succession plans change when there are family members living abroad?
Thank you so much, David. That's a very good question. Domicile is a very important consideration that we need to give when doing succession planning. So, for example, is the client Kenyan domiciled? In his succession planning, would Kenyan laws therefore apply? We would ask, what is the domicile of each child? Because things like domicile, tax residency, all these are very, terms, state-of-the-art terms. So we would need to consider all of that. So even if a person is Kenyan domiciled, but their child is resident in the UK, and that child inherits assets, that child on their income, UK taxes on that income, on the worldwide income. Whereas in Kenya, we are a source-based taxation system. So any assets that we've invested overseas, you don't get taxed on that. But in other jurisdictions like UK, USA, you do get taxed on worldwide income. So it's very important for us to consider where a child is living overseas, and you need to benefit that child in your succession plan. We would actually look at the various structures to make it more tax efficient, so that when the child inherits, then their tax situation is minimized. So these are the different kinds of structures we would look at. Is a trust going to be suitable? Can you look at legislation in those other jurisdictions and say, when should you make a gift? What is the tax situation, so that they don't have to pay higher taxes? So we actually look at it and work with various advisors. So recently we had a client who was terminating his trust and wanted to gift his children in the UK. They're based there, they're resident there. So we had to look at it and work with advisors in the UK. And the advice was, don't give them the gifts now, because there will be higher taxation, wait for a number of years. So we have to look at all this very carefully with legal advisors in those jurisdictions.
Thank you, Mona. Extremely helpful. Madabhushi, just to bring you back in, you mentioned in your introduction about the use of family investment companies, and we heard from Mona there some of the challenges around succession planning. Perhaps you could walk us through how you see the family investment companies being used, and particularly interaction with trusts or other structures that you've seen applied.
Family investment companies are bespoke structures for families, so who need to organize and manage their wealth in a structured way. And there can be an alternative solution to trust, or they can also coexist with trust. What would typically happen in family investment companies is, let's say the parents or the patriarch of the family, they basically they make a provision by giving a loan by creating a family investment company, and they settle the funds into the family investment company. In return, they get voting shares, let's say A shares. Then they can also create, through a memorandum articles of association, the possibility of creating non-voting shares in favor of children while they're still learning, while they are trying to understand the dynamics of wealth creation and wealth management. But they can benefit from distributions by way of dividends or any returns from investments. And that is typically very helpful because family investment companies are limited liability companies, and any income earned by the family investment companies are basically or taxed by way of corporate tax. And for any distributions that are made, either by way of gifts or dividends to the children, to the beneficiaries, so there's no IHT here, inheritance tax. Though in certain jurisdictions, there's also the 7-year rule. Say if the parents have to survive for 7 years, only then the IHT doesn't apply. Otherwise, there's a staggered way of, say, reducing the IHT liability. But what we have seen recently is a trend, is a hybrid platform where trustees, where a trust structure can coexist with family investment companies by creating a purpose trust at the top of the family investment company setup. The purpose trust, the only purpose of the trust is to own shares in the family investment company. And the trustees also play a role as advisors to the family investment company. The board of directors are typically the family members, and they take all decisions on wealth management. And the trustees bring in compliance, governance protocols for the management of the FICs. That's the way it works.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Mona, are you seeing in your practice use of structures like this for families to help improve governance and manage assets?
Yes, David, we are, and we actually help our clients to structure that as well. Recently, we're doing a lot of local trusts because what we have seen is that offshore trusts help in certain situations, but local trusts are more appropriate. Also, they help to keep the wealth in the country, but in certain certain hard assets, it would be easier for local trustees to hold these assets. For example, freehold land in Kenya, it would be important for Kenyan trustees to hold that, because when offshore trustees hold those assets, then the freehold is lost. So we do help a lot of clients to structure local trusts and set up family companies, because there are certain tax exemptions that are available on that as well. So this is an area that we're working a lot with clients on.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for that. And Bimpe, when a business family makes a transition from owning shares in a family company to a liquidity event, they're managing then a portfolio of investments, they're doing something that's perhaps new and different for them. How do you work with them to help make that transition?
That's an interesting one. I think that is something we will be seeing more and more on the African continent, because what we're seeing is, as family businesses grow in scale and importance, we are attracting foreign investors who obviously want to take a stake in family business. And often what happens is families either decide to sell, maybe the patriarch founder might decide to sell all the shares, but often enough, they probably want to sell a minority stake to a third-party investor. But at this point, you suddenly see the family business now belongs to people with different interests. Obviously, previously to that, the whole family's interests aligned. So usually the father, maybe mom and dad, or dad or mom has set up a business, but suddenly we've got third-party interests. So what we tend to do with clients who are going through that journey is, first of all, realizing that now we've got to really look at having ring fence in the family's shares, and using, say, a family investment company, just like Madabhushi mentioned, or even using a family trust of support, so that the family's interests in the company are held through family hold co. And that family holdco, it will be an entity around which the family members sit as, say, board members. And that family holdco then, becomes an asset holding entity that not just for holding the current assets in the shares in that company, receiving dividends, for example, or profits from the shares that the family holdco now owns, maybe 50, 60, 70% of the company, but also governance. Because that family holdco then, usually when that liquidity event happened, there probably would have been all sorts of founder rights or things like in the share purchase agreement. So say, for example, the family has agreed to always have one or two board members on the main board of the main company, but those decisions have to be taken at that family holdco level. So literally what we do is we create that family holding company that allows the family to have a governance structure, a discussion around financial planning for the family's assets and profits, and even a discussion around the strategy for the growth and the next steps, maybe the next exit, or what exactly it wants to do going forward. And so that's something that I think helps and is helping families who see this exit as a way to still sustain the family legacy in the business. Because exiting a family business, creating a liquidity event doesn't mean you walk away and into sunset with a pot of money. Money isn't all family business is about. It's really about the legacy you've created, the family brand, the family goodwill. And that's family entity, that family holdco is what we create to help to hold, sustain, and plan future-proof family wealth, like Madabhushi said earlier. So that's all the sort of work we do.
Madabhushi, I mean, you've got great experience as a banker as well as now in your role in the fiduciary sector. I mean, how do you help families navigate these difficult times when they're going through liquidity event? They're faced with a new set of challenges. What do you bring to bear?
I think in the fiduciary business, what we critically look at is how do you transition wealth from generation to generation? By ensuring when there's liquidity is created by sale of some investment, the money is just not distributed and spent in some cases recklessly. So what we encourage is for the families by creating family investment companies or private trust companies where family members sit as board of directors, and with the guidance of trustees, they take decisions say to reinvest wealth created, and so that the wealth continues within the family and to some extent also helps the communities at large. So the way you do it is basically you need to look at the future of the world. If you really look at Africa specifically, so there's a lot of farm wealth, there's a lot of forest wealth, there's a lot of mineral wealth. How do you create specific products that enhance agri-business, for example, agri-processing? How do you create products around mineral wealth, around farm wealth? How do you securitize fixed assets in property, in farmland, in forestry, and then convert it into a liquid kind of a situation where, like real estate investment trust, for example, that's an example, where you basically securitize a fixed asset and then create opportunities for people to participate in the growth. So I think these are some of the areas that we look at. We are also now encouraging, particularly with the onset of the pandemic last year, how do you future-proof wealth? So how do you marry technology to healthcare, for example? How do you enhance agri-processing by technology interventions? So these are specific, let's say, opportunities in the Africa context, because I have always argued vehemently there's need for, let's say, even private banks which are Africa-centric. Because we have private banks from Geneva, from all over the world coming to Africa and giving solutions which are, let's say, the Western solutions, if I can call it that. But you need Africa-centric private banks who understand wealth creation, wealth preservation, and future-proofing wealth in the African context. And that can be only built around African assets. But then you need to bring technology into that. That's the only way to do it.
Thank you for that. Very, very helpful. Very interesting as well. Mona, just to bring you back in, I mean, in terms of preserving wealth as they go through a transition with a liquidity event, I mean, the trust structuring and planning can give families comfort, can't they, that wealth will be protected, and that beneficiaries who are younger and still learning how to handle wealth can be protected and make sure it's preserved. Do you see the trust or the structuring vehicles as important to help the families at this time, you know, if they are selling a stake in a substantial business? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so trusts, definitely help to preserve wealth and also grow wealth, because, trustees would then have, they can work with advisors, professional advisors to grow that wealth. And sometimes, in the situations of families who are not, financial savvy, it would help to have trustees look after that wealth. And once assets go into a trust, they're not part of an estate, so they're not subject to probate. And in other jurisdictions, in Kenya, inheritance tax doesn't apply, but in other jurisdictions, they would not be subject to inheritance tax. So depending on a client's situation, the estate planning is important. And where trusts would help, then we would advise clients to set those trusts up. They can be set up and certain assets can be transferred now. We would need to look at the tax circumstances of that. And certain assets can be transferred now and others can be transferred under a will, on death. So we would have to look at a client situation and then, advise on the best way forward. Taxes become very relevant in all this planning.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Bimpe, I mean, many family offices have a taste for real estate, for private equity. We heard there from Madabhushi about opportunities that families will see local to them as well as international. I mean, but obviously that carries risk. It's very different to having a portfolio of liquid investments. How do you, when you're advising family on investment opportunities, or how do you help them navigate considerations for those, whether they invest in certain projects or not?
I think first and foremost, I think what we're seeing on the African continent, unfortunately, is there is still quite a bit of volatility in the domestic currencies. I mean, I'm Nigerian and I'm very sort of aware of the sort of current currency risk, especially with the Naira. And I'm sure perhaps in East Africa, it might not be as dire, but it's currently quite bad in Nigeria. So, but what you do see is that families of wealth on the African continent realize that a lot of their expenses, especially when it comes to their children's education, for example, are going to be in hard currency, in US dollars or in pound sterling. So when we onboard a client, when we're looking at their financial planning, many clients have a dollar income. Perhaps they're in oil and gas, or they're in a particular sector. Maybe they export, for example, and where they're earning dollars. And so we try to harness what we can offshore, as in create a diversification of their portfolio, so that of course many of them are taking major risk on the continent in their domestic countries because of the businesses that they run. And so that's already, their main risk is in their business. They're reinvesting continuously. And of course they have local expenses, but then we look at where the surplus and we create a pot in foreign currency. And the idea is that even that pot in foreign currency is not a matter of capital flight leaving the continent and never coming back. But the whole idea is, if you can create a surplus in a currency that's safe, then when you do need the money back, at home in your business or for other family expenses, it's a matter of inflowing it back into the country as an investment, potentially, and even reaping the benefit, unfortunately, of any, currency sort of depreciation. Because if you've taken the money out at a time and the money is, worth more in your local currency, then you're getting the advantage of that. So we're very keen when we start off with a client and looking at their consolidated wealth and seeing how much needs to be held outside, looking at property. I mean, there was a time when investing in UK real estate was, I would say it's still a profitable venture, but it's fraught with a lot of tax planning at the moment. And so it's not as, I would say, attractive as it was. But even then, those who invest in UK real estate saw it as another means of holding their monies offshore in a safe haven. So we work with African clients. I think being from Nigeria, having grown up there on the continent, we're very alive to the fact that we can't just shut our eyes for the long-term sustainability of families' wealth for the next generation, especially because many next gens live and go abroad to study, and the expenses are there in hard currency. And until they start earning their living, the parents still have to fund a lifestyle outside the home country. So those parents have to think of a property portfolio that might earn passive income to help, meet those expenses. Having a portfolio of, securities of stocks and bonds with a private bank that's also going to have returns that, would actually help meet some of these expenses. So we work with clients in helping to design and structure. And like you mentioned earlier, I also own an FCA regulated entity that's, very active in the asset management industry in the UK. So we can actually help clients, in looking at how to diversify and hold their portfolio across various currencies.
So currency really is the major consideration, isn't it, really? A sterling investor might think, oh, equities, bonds, where's my risk? But actually, like diversification, in currency, global currency will help the clients.
It will help. And I just must add that, fortunately, again, many clients on the African continent are seeing their wealth being eroded just by the currency risk. So even if you're worth a million Kenyan shillings is not what it was worth, I'm sure, 10 years ago. And therefore, you do need to ensure that you're thinking forward and moving any surplus assets into a safer currency, to be able to bring it back later on for your business or for your family's needs.
Okay, thank you. And Madabhushi, in your role in the fiduciary sector, you're helping families, I suppose, analyse whether it's real estate or private equity type transactions. How do you help them, I suppose, due diligence or analyse the different opportunities, the parties they're working with, in order to protect the family's wealth within structures? How do you use your experience to help them decide where, a sound investment lies? Hi there, Madabhushi. Did you catch that question? I was just asking in your...
No, I temporarily lost connection. I just rejoined. Sorry about that. Okay.
No problem. I was just saying, in your role in the fiduciary sector, you're helping families look at opportunities in real estate or private equity or other sectors and understand which opportunities are sound and will protect and preserve and enhance the family's wealth. How do you use your experience across your career to help them understand where they should be investing?
Well, real estate is a passion in Africa. And I think there's a sentimental attachment to real estate. Sometimes I get the feeling that there's too much sentiment out there to the detriment of some families, because there are lots of families we meet who say, look, whatever happens, I'm not going to sell this. And even if there's a liquidity requirement, I'm not going to use my farm, which I inherited, say, for the last 2 generations. So I think there's a balance we look at. So we certainly, of course, look at real estate has got to be a part of the portfolio that we build. Real estate has got to be there. Then private equity, yes, you can, say, for example, contribute a part of your wealth to private equity. But one needs to remember that for real estate and private equity, the return, for example, the returns can be good, but returns will come after a long time. They are long-term assets, so one needs to be patient. If one makes a private equity investment, you are stuck for 7 years, if not more, and then the time is not right, you are not able to get out. And the is, as trustees, we do not encourage too much investment into one class. We encourage a balanced portfolio build, including some foreign currency exposure, like Bimpe is suggesting, because every family needs, education of children, there's health requirements. If you need a BUPA policy or whatever it is, you need to have to create some funds to meet your insurance requirements. A balanced fund is the best. And that takes into consideration your requirement in various currencies. How much do you need in US dollars for your travel, for your lifestyle, for your insurance requirements, for your education requirements. Build a base for that. What you can preserve for a long period, but patient capital is invested in real estate and also in private equity, that kind of situation there. But of course, the pandemic has brought new challenges. How much real estate do you want to hold? And can you kind of securitize whatever real estate you hold so that you can also create liquidity around that?
Okay, thanks. And Mona, you had the real estate practice at Anjarwalla and Khanna. Do you see any of these trends in real estate coming through for private clients in terms of tastes and trends for their investment projects, or any changes through COVID to that to the supply of property or how things are being developed?
Thank you, David. Yes, real estate is. Kenyans are very passionate about real estate, and I think all Africans are as well. So yes, the trends we see is that people want to have a good real estate portfolio. We would advise them, depending on their circumstances, whether to hold it in personal names or if it's matrimonial property, maybe as joint owners. We're advising on family company setups as well. So sometimes the companies hold the real estate. So it just depends on the circumstances of every family or every business as to how they should hold the real estate. And, tax plays a vital role. There are certain tax exemptions available that we try and use to move around the real estate from one owner to another owner. So it helps in restructuring as well for businesses and for families. So yes, these are the trends we're seeing where people, are utilizing these tax exemptions and different structures as part of their planning for the future as well.
Okay, thank you. Bimpe, you deliver your services from London. COVID's obviously changed the amount of travel in all professionals' lives. How have you found this virtual environment for dealing with clients and other professionals? Have you found people have acclimatized to it and they're actually finding some upside in it? What's your view?
I think absolutely. I think we've all learned to live with technology, and it has its upside. I think the upside is, first of all, efficiency of time, because obviously, to meet a client, I'd have to get on a plane, book an appointment, wait around, get in traffic. I mean, Lagos is sort of my main destinations, and Accra, the two main places. I also visit Cameroon and Dakar, but my clients are mostly Nigeria and Ghana. But that's changed. So that's, I think, the ability, and I think existing clients, are very welcome the fact that we touch of a button, we can get on a call and resolve issues very quickly. But also, it used to be quite challenging to hold family foundation meetings, because I also support families who have private trust companies or foundations, and the fiduciary providers who we engage either out of Jersey or Mauritius or Isle of Man or Geneva often have to either say, people will give you a proxy, or we'll be on the other end of the line at the telephone and just pop into the meeting for 5 minutes on the phone. And suddenly, actually, I'm finding that with Zoom, we can have meetings where family members who are in the US and Nigeria and fiduciary services and private bankers, and we're all sitting on a call and having a very productive meeting. And actually, it's been the first time that many of the fiduciary providers have met their clients face to face, because some of them haven't yet traveled to Nigeria, or the person holding the portfolio hasn't been to Nigeria. And if the client hasn't been able to fly to Geneva or Jersey, they've just been on the other end of an email. So now we're actually having a bit of more human contact and having these meetings that are virtual but very productive. Having said that, I still believe that when it comes to meeting and greeting the new clients, onboarding, fresh clients, they do. And I think clients would rather, if you're going to trust someone, you kind of want to meet them in person, and actually, body language and that's, physical touch is still important. So, I mean, it's worked very well for existing clients. But I think for there are a couple of clients I've met virtually, but who I know I will wait until we actually have that meeting face to face to actually sign on the dotted line. So, but it does have its pros and cons.
Terrific. We're coming to the end of our session just now. I'm just going to come to each panelist for just their sort of top tip for those tuned in, perhaps starting with Mona. What's the top tip on succession planning, Mona, for those tuned in?
Wealth and succession planning is very, very important and should be your top priority. And it's important, to provide for ensure that your wealth is passed on the way you would like it to be passed on. Don't wait, act now. That is my advice.
Perfect, great. Madabhushi, what would you say is your top tip on the structuring side?
Well, I would say that, like Mona said, absolutely important to think about succession planning in a proper way, in a structured way. And going forward, bring solutions around technology, but also be very clear about cybersecurity and how to use data to maximize wealth and wealth preservation and wealth enhancement. But at the end of the day, I'm passionate about preserving wealth, not just for your family and the descendants, but for the community at large. I think there's a wider, much larger interest there, which is vitally important. Because if the communities are not wealthy at the end of the day, who are the off-takers of the products that are created by the wealthy people? So you need that as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And Bimpe, any closing comments as we wrap up this hour?
Oh, my closing comments are definitely, I think, as you create your wealth journey, I think you've got to be very strategic and purposeful and intentional about how that wealth is managed. Perhaps services of wealth of a multi-family office or a trusted advisor, definitely, and thinking about the next gen, thinking that they will want to do things differently, bringing them on early, communicating about wealth is very important, and that's the only way that families will be able to ensure the transfer of wealth in a conflict-free manner to the next generation.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you to this panel on wealth structuring and succession planning. I hope you found it useful.